that you're a little fucked up.
Hello, my name is Ian Vargo, and today I'm going to be doing a deep dive into the production of my song, I Love You Even More Now That You're a Little Fucked Up. I'm going to be talking about the writing, recording, mixing, and mastering of the song. I'll also be talking about the analog hardware, instruments, pedals, and of course, plugins I used during production. It was quite a journey to bring this production to life, and I imagine this video will be too. I'm super grateful that you're along for the ride, so let's get right to it. So before I talk about how this song was written, you'll notice that I have Ableton Live pulled up here. Sometimes I use Pro Tools, other times I use Live, every so often I'll use Logic. To me, it's important to choose the DAW at the beginning of the production based on what the song needs, and because I wanted to be a little bit more experimental and creative in the production phase, I went with Live. I love the warping algorithm, the things that you can do with audio, Live's built-in effects. That's why I chose it for this song. Other times, I just want to capture a band or an artist, and if that's the case, and I'm going for more of a simple capture and edit, then I'll go with Pro Tools because it can be more precise than Live. So as I'm sure you've noticed, I'm holding a guitar. This is my Fender Jazzmaster, and I can honestly say this song wouldn't exist if not for this guitar. I was playing around late one night, and I noticed that there's something up with the bridge pickup. It sounds fucked up, for lack of a better term. Normally when you turn the tone all the way down, it just sounds a bit duller and darker. But on the pickup here, it sounds quieter and slightly harsher and almost phasey. I think something to do with the wiring, I don't know. But rather than get frustrated and pick up a different guitar, I sort of leaned into it, combined it with some effects like fuzz, and ended up writing what was the riff that is the chorus for the song, which I'm about to show you. So I've got the original Ableton Live set here. It contains scratch guitars, scratch vocals, scratch everything. So not sounding its best. I'm more concerned with just getting the ideas out. I mean, you'll see the tracks are named audio. I'm not caring so much about organization at this point. I just want to get my ideas on the page, so to speak. Let's have a listen to that guitar riff, 6 layers of harmony. Here we go. So we'll break down that harmony a little bit later. On top of that, I started singing the lyrics, which were sort of inspired by the fact that my guitar sounded fucked up. I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up, which I think, although originally it was about my guitar, it can be applied to other possessions, your favorite pair of jeans, your loved ones, yourself. So although it was inspired by my guitar, the lyric is about a lot of things. So let's have a listen to the scratch vocals here, which are layered pretty densely. We've got 6 layers of me singing. I think I was just singing into this AKG C414 on Omni. Sounds pretty rough. And we're also going to hear some scratch drums. Here we go.
To me, I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up. I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up.
I knew that even early on, I couldn't have that sonic palette and that level of energy for the entire song. So I think I went to bed, and then the next morning I woke up and started to ideate what the verse could be, perhaps, for this song. And let's solo the verse guitars. These are going to sound pretty rough as well, because again, everything is scratch. This is me going direct into my interface with my Jazzmaster. Yeah, so that is a lot different than the chorus, obviously, and that's what I sought out to do. In fact, if we look at the end of the verse here, both the verse vocals and the verse guitars, they're just kind of chopped. It's almost like I wanted the chorus to interrupt the verse. Let's have a listen.
Only seem to endear you dear to me. I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up. this old body don't work so perfectly.
So once I had my demo going and the different parts of the song structure planned out, I will play drums via MIDI, trying to envision what I want them to be ultimately. And I always bring on my good friend, great drummer, great engineer, John O'Reilly Jr. He's got this website, boomcrashdrumtracks.com. He is amazing. As you can see right here, you email him your music, he records the drums, and sends you the files. He sends me a Pro Tools session, and there are 3 takes, and normally the first take is pretty in alignment with what I sent him, and he gets a little bit more expressive on take 2 and take 3. They sound amazing, they're performed perfectly. John is an amazing musician, great communicator. I can't strongly enough recommend him. So let's take a look at the drums once they were in Ableton Live. So it was exciting for me to get these drums from John because then I could feel like I could perform on top of it and have it feel more like a band. We're not in a band, but I wanted this song to feel like that. So getting those drums was really instrumental in creating the groove and the feeling upon which I could lay down everything else, especially the bass and guitars. So now I'm going to play all of the drums. You'll hear them all together, and then I will show you what the different tracks are and the processing that I applied to them. It's important for me to mention that when I'm applying this processing, whether it be EQ, compression, saturation, whatever, I'm usually not soloing tracks and simply trying to make them sound as good as they possibly can when soloed. I'm always considering how they fit into the overall drum sound and how that drum sound fits within the song. So something worth considering. But for the sake of this, I will show you the individual tracks and the processing. So here we go. Here's the drums. So I've got all of my drums routed through this group in Ableton Live, and upon that I've got an API 2500 and Saturate, which is a clipper, great clipper from Newfangled Audio. Let's listen to the individual layers and you'll see the processing that I used on them. This is a kick track. That's a kick sample. All of those kicks together sound like this. And then just for the chorus, I added in these samples here. We had an 808. And not sure what this one is. Yeah, I just added some crunchy saturation and low end just in the choruses. Here's all of the kicks together. Moving on to the snares, they are grouped, and it looks like I have some Neve and distressor. This is a really important part of my snare drum sound, is dialing in compression on it so it smacks just right, and the distressor is great for that. Here are all the snares. You can hear it without that processing. Yeah, the Neve and the distressor just add a little bit more attitude and smack. We've got the snare top. John delivers sort of a crunchy snare top track. I think he distorts it with some of his preamps. You'll notice I'm going kind of crazy with this mag EQ. There's this air band that goes up to 40 kilohertz, and I am pushing as hard as I can with that to bring out the brightness of that snare track. I've got a sample laid in here. Snare bottom, you're going to hear a lot of the chain that resides on the bottom of the snare. Yeah, so I'm really going for like attitude and punch, and you could hear as I add in more things, it's like some tracks take care of the low end, other tracks take care of the brightness, other tracks are simply the, you know, the snare mechanism itself. The toms are processed with a pretty liberal amount of decapitator, and this EQ curve. Now, admittedly, that sounds kind of distorted and fluttery and weird on its own, but I find that because of how clean digital recording is, I'm often trying to add back in harmonics and characters that would have been inherent in the recording if we were using analog tape in an old school studio. So if you see a lot of like Studer or Decapitator or Saturn or any of the other saturators I use, that's kind of my MO, is like to add back in character that is maybe lacking because of just how clean digital recording can be. Moving on, we've got hi-hat. I'm getting rid of a lot of low end in that. Mono overhead. Let's take it from the chorus again. This is a little trickery here. You'll notice that I pan the mono overhead left-right when he does that cymbal thing. It looks like I'm trying to remove the kick from that mono overhead and using this really fun Kelvin tone shaper saturation plugin from Tone Projects. Stereo overheads, more distressor. Crotch mic. This is a popular technique for recording engineers to have a microphone aimed at the crotch of the drummer. Doesn't look like I'm doing any processing. I've got this FabFilter Pro Q3 plugin that is not found and I wasn't using it. Sounds like this. A little bit more fun with the panning there. Got some rooms, and upon the rooms, I've got a good amount of compression and getting rid of the kick fundamental. That compressor is really bringing out the sound of the drums in the room, and for that reason, I am also removing a fair amount of the kick. We have a far room track. Later in the song, this is something I do every so often, if the production needs it, is I will duplicate the room track. And in moments that need to sound really exciting and powerful, I will compress the shit out of that track. And lately I've been using the Devil Lock Audio Level Destroyer. This is sort of a tribute to the Shure Level Lock. This thing is just totally disgusting, and I love it. So let's have a listen to that. Let's remove it and you'll hear how it sounds. Yeah, that sounds a lot more powerful and vibrant and interesting to me. Let's move on. I kind of do the same thing with these far rooms over here. I've got the devil lock again. And looks like this one was panned to the far right. That pretty much does it for all of the drums. There are moments where I'm bringing up and down the levels of certain things. If we go look at the automation here, if I recall the hi-hat, I worked pretty hard on, even though I can gate my drums, sometimes I just like doing it manually. So if we look at this hi-hat and listen to it, you'll notice that I'm removing sort of where the kick drum would be and just riding up the level so that the hi-hat itself is heard and none of the other drums are. Here we go. So that's a sort of manual gating situation. It looks like I did that with the rooms as well. It's important to mention that all of that processing that you just saw, I didn't apply that until the other elements were recorded, the bass, the guitars, etc. Speaking of bass, now's a good time to show you how I filled out the rhythm section. John sent me the drums, and I always love playing bass on top of his performance. I used my Hofner bass, sort of has a Paul McCartney vibe, obviously. It's a super warm, round, wonderful sound just coming right out of the bass, plugged into my Cappy preamp, which is sort of like an API style preamp. On this track, the verse, for the most part, was played with my fingers, and the chorus was played with a pick. The reason I did that is the finger style has a more round, musical, full-bodied tone that worked for the verses, compared to the chorus, which had more of an aggressive, plucky thing. And really, the pick helped the bass cut through in the mix. Let's have a listen with the bass and drums both playing. I'm going to add in the chorus guitars, and you'll really hear how the picked bass is important. Both the verse and chorus basses are running through this group, and I have quite a lot of processing happening. I've got some Neve 1073 EQ boosting a good amount of highs. I think next we've got the Fairchild, just a little bit of compression, tends to warm things up a little bit. The Studer is a favorite of mine on everything from vocals to drums to bass, obviously. I put it on groups. It's super versatile. It's like an EQ, a saturator, compressor, all in one. We've got the Decapitator, which I tend to do something like this a lot. Just boosting a little bit, maybe turn the drive up to 2 or 3, makes things sound a little bit thicker depending on how you have these set. These are the different styles of saturation. From there, we have Saturn II, where I can split the bands. I've got 3 separate bands here, and I'm doing some different type of processing on each. Looks like mostly with the warm tape setting. And then lastly, some Pro Q4. I think I'm just kind of doing a little bit of a dynamic move here. Let's have a listen to it without any of this processing on the bass group, and then I will bring it in halfway through the chorus so you can hear the bass really kind of jump out. Yeah, a lot thicker in the low end, more present, a lot more character. Don't complain about it being louder. That's part of why you do these processes. I hear complaints all the time, but it's not level matched. Yeah, it's not level matched. Like that's part of the job of a mixing engineer to make things louder. Shut up. While we are on the topic of guitars, we should talk about the guitars in this song, which I re-recorded. I had a bit of a anxiety attack because I noticed that the original guitars, which I would have kept, were slightly out of tune, but enough out of tune to where I couldn't keep them. And I also changed the settings on some of my pedals. I know that the ZVEX Fuzz Factory, it's one of my favorite pedals ever, was super instrumental in achieving this tone. And I had changed things around a little bit on my pedal board, and so I could never nail the tone exactly, but I'm pretty happy with where we landed. None of the individual guitar tracks had any processing on them, just the tuner plugin, which I used when recording, and then the group has the FabFilter Pro Q4 to bring out a good amount of mids to help it cut through in the mix, and the Manly Varimu, which was very helpful in removing some of like the buzzy harshness that these guitars had. So let's listen to all of the guitars. We'll start without the processing and then I'll bring it in. You can hear sounds more present up front, a little bit thicker, and at the same time, a little bit less harsh. It's worth having a closer look at this guitar part, musically speaking. These three bottom tracks here are the root note of the chords, which are C, G, and D. They sound like this. And then each track on top of them is a harmony going from low to high, so we can add these in. So let's take it from the top, the highest harmony, and then I will gradually build going down. Here we go. I tried to play them pretty tight because I wanted it to feel kind of just like one big majestic guitar. And I also edited these so that there was silence where the snare hit would be, because that is a big part of mixing, to me at least, is having certain elements have their moment to poke through. And so I really didn't want the sort of buzzy tails of these notes to linger on top of the snare. So that's what you're seeing with these mutes here in Ableton Live. I will say that sonically and compositionally, this is sort of a tribute to one of my guitar heroes, Brian May of Queen. Part of what I love about electric guitar is how versatile it is, sonically speaking. So we have that really bright, fuzzy sound in the chorus. I wanted something very different for the verses, so I used my Fender Jazzmaster again, but this time I was either going clean, direct into the preamps with some reverb, or to my Fender Princeton amplifier, mic'd up with an SM7B and a Shure SM57. And I'm playing the tremolo, also known as the whammy bar, the whole time, which adds this sort of wonky pitch, unstable sound, which is the essence of the song. And it sounds like this. And I tried to not play it too perfectly. I almost wanted it to sound like somebody that was learning how to play guitar, which I guess I still am. And once recorded and doubled, it sounds like this. This is the direct guitar here, and it is processed with a little bit of this Warble plugin from Neold, which is a lot of fun, and a little bit of FabFilter Pro Q4 to remove some of the super highs and lows and add some pickiness to it as well. That is the direct guitar. That's the one that's going right into my preamp. These are the Fender Princeton guitars with an SM7B and a 57. There's no processing on them. The reverb is from this company called Surfy Bear. They make an amazing spring reverb. It sounds super authentic, and I use that for both of these. The group in which both of these guitars reside have FabFilter Pro Q4, again, removing some high end. I wanted it to sound sort of lo-fi and dark, and then Devil Lock. If we were to remove the Devil Lock, it's a pretty substantial difference. It sounds a lot less upfront. Here we go. Yes, as you can hear, without Devil Lock, sounds a lot more buried and quiet. That Devil Lock helps bring the guitar forward. So I'm feeling pretty good at this point with my rhythm section, with the drums, the bass, and the guitar. Sounds like this. Yeah, so now I think it's time we should move on to the vocals. So the verse vocals were a lot more challenging to me than the choruses because they were sung more sweetly and needed more articulation and just generally more challenging. So I recorded them on separate tracks. So these are the verses here. Let's start with these. You'll also notice that this series of clips, yellow, green, light green, blue, red, orange, that's different take lanes. I will record a pass and do all of the verses and then do it again and again and again and again. I think I probably did like 10 or 15 takes and then chose the best bits from each of them and put it together. So this is my AKG C414 here. I also recorded with an SM7B at the same exact time. You have to make sure that the phase alignment is good, otherwise it starts to sound weird. It's not something I do on every recording, but I liked it for this one. The 414 is very bright. The SM7B is darker and a little bit fuller, so I combined them for the ultimate vocal sound. I duplicated the SM7B because the second one has some kind of aggressive parallel processing happening. And so all of these tracks are going through this group, which has a lot. This is my vocal chain. I am not embarrassed to say that, like many of my singer-songwriter heroes, I'm not a virtuoso singer, and I also don't have an amazing tone, but I do what I can, and I try to express myself the best that I can with my instrument. So we've got just a little bit of auto-tune, FabFilter Pro DS to tame sibilance, Neve 1073, boosting at 15K. Looks like that's 4, 5K, and 110. Devil Lock, one of my favorite plugins, as you can tell. Studer Tape to add some tapiness, some saturation to it. Decapitator, which is set to punish. It's a pretty drastic sound, but I have dialed back the mix a lot. And then Soothe 2, one of those plugins I probably could not live without. With all of these aforementioned plugins, there's inevitably some brightness and harshness that is added that Soothe sort of helps recover. And then Bloom, I believe this was adding some shininess to the vocal. The verse vocals I wanted to be a bit more bright and clear than the chorus vocals. So this was probably about contrast. Now let's have a listen to the verse vocals in the mix with and then without the processing chain. And you're going to hear a difference. With the processing, they're a lot tighter and brighter and sit better in the mix. Here we go.
Now candy don't taste quite as sweet to you and the lines are looking deeper on your face.
And without.
Now candy don't taste quite as sweet to you, and the lines are looking deeper on your face.
Yeah, it's almost like there's a blanket or towel covering my voice without the processing. Not very clear, doesn't sit well in the mix. The processing helped a lot. For the third verse of this song, I wanted the vocals to sound more ethereal and spacey, so I ran them to some additional reverbs and delays. Also, what I like doing is sending signal, doesn't have to be vocals, but in this case it was, out of Pro Tools or Ableton or whatever, through this reamp box that I have, and then I route that signal through pedals and guitar amps and then re-record it. It can add all sorts of different interesting characters, and what I did in this case was route the vocals through this, the Microcosm pedal by Hologram. It's a great device. It's kind of like a multi-effects unit, has some glitchy sounds, reverb, delay. It's pretty impressive pedal. And so let's have a listen to the vocals first processed with reverb and delay, and then I'll show you the Microcosm voices.
You see your daddy's lost a step or two, the quiver in your mama's aging voice.
Now let's have a listen to the Microcosms. Here we are.
Note on your piano, changing how you play this tune. It's better to be warned than not enjoyed.
The chorus vocals I didn't overthink too much. I sort of wanted them to sound like a sloppy gang vocal thing. So we see 4 or 5 tracks here. That's all of the takes. I didn't do comping or anything. I just did the take and again and again and again, and that ended up being these 4 tracks. One of the tracks has some compression on it, and then on the group, we see my usual tons of stuff. The usual suspects, de-essing, some compression, decapitator, studer, bloom, soothe, kind of a lot. If you listen to them, they sort of have like a crunchy quality that sounds strange on its own, but worked in the mix. Let's solo them.
I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up. I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up.
I'm pretty sure that's decapitator, and normally I wouldn't want my vocals to distort like that, but honestly, in the context of the song, it worked, so I kept it. I had some great collaborators on this song. My good friend Jason Cummings lent a bunch of things, including backup vocals. Let's hear mine and Jason's vocals together.
I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up. I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up.
On top of that, I'm so grateful that I was able to record Jordan, who lent such a different, beautiful texture on top of the vocals that were already there. Let's have a listen to her vocals blended in.
I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up. I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up.
Really starts to sound like a gang vocal at that point. I'd like to show you one of my favorite vocal production techniques, which involves using auto shift. It's Ableton's take on a tuning software. You could use it in a more traditional manner, but in this case, I used the MIDI capability. I started by singing the words that I wanted to hear, but in a monotone fashion. Have a listen.
I love you even more now.
I then played in the melody that I wanted those vocals to be tuned to via MIDI. And what you can do then is essentially key auto shift to that MIDI performance so it tunes those vocals to that. And it sounds like this.
I love you even more now.
You can then play with the pitch, bringing it up or down an octave, and the formant, which will make it sort of sound more full or thin depending on how you have it set. I played around with that a lot, ultimately coming up with 15 separate layers, which are panned left and right. Sounds like this.
I love you even more now.
Admittedly, on its own, sounds a bit cheesy, kind of like Kermit the Frog, but when you combine it with an actual human singer, it creates this really interesting texture. Let's have a listen to it all together.
I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up. I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up.
And if you put it all together with the rest of the vocals, sounds pretty powerful.
I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up. I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up.
Let's have a listen to the guitar solo. This was my Fender Stratocaster, a couple of distortion pedals, and a wah pedal, which I have not really found use for on many of my productions, but I was excited to use it on this one. I used 2 microphones on my Fender Princeton, one SM57, which is right here, and an SM7B, which is here. And let's listen to the different tones, and this will be before processing. No plugins on this. So you can hear that the SM57 is a bit brighter in the treble. I would say that the SM7B is more mid-rangey. You were just hearing them separate. Let's put them together. It's very, very important to make sure that your recordings are phase aligned. I might have nudged the SM7B a little bit on this one, but as you can see, like the peaks and the troughs are pretty much in alignment here. It might be like a sampler or two to the right here, but it's really, really important to make sure that your tracks are phase aligned. You could make the argument that moving one of these 2 tracks to the left or right, a couple of samples, it changes the sound, and maybe that's what you want. But for me, generally, I try to start making sure that my tracks are phase aligned, and I work from there. So now we're looking at the processing that is placed on the group in which both of these tracks are. I started with the FabFilter Pro C2, just deharshed the guitar a little bit because I had a wah pedal going. It's a lot of upper mid-range and treble. Then I have some FabFilter Pro Q4 in dynamic mode to additionally tame 2K and 10K and a little bit of a bump at about 750. And then this Kelvin plugin has become one of my favorite plugins. All of the Tone Project's plugins, the Kelvin Tone Shaper, the Michelangelo EQ, and the Unisum Mastering Compressor are top-notch plugins. And so I did remove some treble with the Pro Q4. This Kelvin adds some sort of fizziness to it that on its own doesn't sound quite right, but helped the guitar sound correct within the context of the mix. Let's hear without these plugins, and then I'll bring them in. It's funny listening back to that. You would think with the mid-range being removed due to these plugins that it would sort of make the guitar not cut through correctly, but that's why it's so important to not just process when you're in solo. You got to consider the guitar amongst everything else, and for whatever reason, by using Kelvin, Pro C2, and FabFilter Pro Q4, which is removing a pretty good amount of upper mid-range and treble, It just worked better in the mix, even if on its own sounds a little bit weird. After I recorded the guitar solo, I noticed that this particular part of it wasn't cutting through quite right. So I doubled it with a synthesizer. I have a Roland JX03, sort of this cute little mini synthesizer sitting right here. And I doubled that part. Let's have a listen to that. Let's hear them combined. Just help that part of the melody poke through a little bit. There's something fun happening to the last note of that solo. Have a listen. I wanted it to have this vinyl spin down technique, so I used this unfiltered audio needlepoint plugin, which is fantastic, has so many different capabilities, incredible sound design tool. Let's go to the top of the solo and I'll just play with the spin down. You could hear what it does. A lot of fun. I believe that I automated that and then printed it within Ableton Live to achieve that effect. Let's have a listen to the beginning of the guitar solo, and you'll notice that the entire mix is being run through a flanger. I wanted to try this technique called zero through flanging, and I kind of approximated it. Let's have a listen. This part was a lot of trial and error. I tried the Phase Mistress by Soundtoys, which is great, but ultimately settled on the MXR flanger doubler, and I didn't put it right on the main track here. I applied it to different groups within Ableton Live and then printed those here. Let's have a listen to them. All of these tracks are stereo. This one is panned all the way to the left. This one is panned all the way to the right. And this one is panned center, so full stereo. Put them together and it sounds like this. And you'll notice that I use this utility plugin to increase the stereo width and also invert the polarity. For whatever reason, it wasn't sounding right without the polarity inverted, so that's what I did. One of my favorite arrangement techniques is to simply have more stuff happening in the final chorus than at any other point in the song. And so to accomplish that, in addition to the vocal counterpoint layers that I played before, I also have these stomps and claps that I sourced from a session from like 15 years ago. So always save your old stuff. You'll find use for certain things at certain points, I guarantee you. Let's have a listen. And let's combine that with the drums. I wanted the end to have this almost celebratory quality to it. So between the many, many layers of people singing and the stomps and claps, it started to feel like a bunch of people in a room. Let's have a look at my mix bus here. We're almost done. I've got the Brainworks BX Digital V3 Mastering EQ. This is a mid-side equalizer. I'm doing very slight moves, only removing about a half dB here or there at certain frequencies, both in the mono and stereo sections. I'm just finding resonances and areas where there's buildup just to remove that before any other processing. I also have a mono maker happening. Everything beneath 53 Hertz is being made mono. Next is the newfangled Audio Elevate. This has an excellent limiter, transient emphasis, and clipper that I'm using a little bit of each on these. This plugin really helps make mixes sound more upfront and approximate to the listener. After that, I've got the Unisum from Tone Projects. This is a fantastic mastering compressor. I sort of set it like I would a SSL master bus compressor that you would find on a console, very similar settings, and only want to do about 1 dB of gain reduction at any given moment. After that, I've got the UAD Oxford inflator. This effect knob, it's like a cheat code. You just turn it up and everything sounds a little bit more vibrant and lively and interesting. Essentially, it's sort of a saturator, but very subtle but noticeable. Lastly, the FabFilter Pro L2 limiter. This finds its way onto many of my mixes and masters. I have my output set to -0.2 dB, and I did opt to have true peak limiting turned off here. I should mention that I have the utility plugin in Ableton Live so that about 3 dB of gain is being reduced before any of these plugins, because I found I was coming in pretty hot. So I'm going to leave that on, but then I'm going to turn off my mix bus chain so you can hear the difference between processed and unprocessed.
I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up. I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up. I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up. I love you even more now that you're a little fucked up. I love you even more now.
Yeah, to me, it's somewhat slight, but there is an immediacy to everything that I certainly wanted. There's like this excitement, in particular in the choruses, that I found that these particular processors set this way helped. And I am generally going through and doing it in this order, starting with the EQ, then moving to elevate, a little bit of compression after that. Sometimes I'll find that I have to go back into my mix and look at the drums, look at the vocals. Depending on how these are set, they might bring out some things that I don't want. I should mention that I also have some excellent analog hardware that finds its way onto most of my productions. I've got an Overstayer MAS, it's a tape saturation hardware unit, a high voltage audio EQ6S, sort of a mag style equalizer, and a Neve Portico 2 master bus processor. All of these are great units, and although I do find myself using them on most things, I really did on this one to incorporate one of them, all of them, and it just wasn't happening. I found that the transients were getting less powerful. The stereo image, just overall, it just wasn't working. So if you're a aspiring producer, mixing, mastering engineer, and you see engineers with expensive hardware and you have like fear of missing out, don't. You can accomplish amazing things with plugins. Obviously, there is a lot of great hardware that was used on the way in, and plenty of high quality plugins during the mixing of this. I think that I produced this song to have so much character at either the microphone or during the mix that when I tried to impart character with these devices at the end, it just wasn't working. So I printed a WAV file out of Ableton Live with that mix bus processing, which is essentially the mastering. I then loaded that into Pro Tools here because I liked a previous mix, the flanger guitar solo thing that I did. I preferred a different version of that, so I stitched them together here in Pro Tools. I have heard that just by the nature of printing out of Ableton Live versus printing out of Pro Tools, there will be a difference in sound quality. And so I wanted to check that. So I took my original export from Live and then my export from Pro Tools. Mind you, the Pro Tools had no processing whatsoever on it. And then I inverted the polarity on the latter. And what you should hear is the two masters null out. You should hear nothing at all once you play them both at the same time. So let's check that. Let's add in the inverted. and we hear nothing. So if anybody ever tells you just by printing through a different DAW you are going to have a different sound quality, they are wrong. And that's it. I've had a great time recalling the production of this song. It was a lot of work. I hope that you've had a great time here too. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out.